steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing he's could say could make that any better.
Yeah, nobody. No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home. You.
Welcome to DRS FC, an F1 podcast by soccer nerds. I am André Carlisle, and we are here to talk about the Austin Grand Prix 2024. Unfortunately, it didn't quite give us all the stuff we needed in order to keep the Drivers' Championship alive, but there's a lot to talk about. And to do so, I've got Deepti Ajampur with me. Deepti, how are you?
I'm doing well, André. Excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. And Kyle Carr. Kyle, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good. And Donald Wine. Donald, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Let's talk about Austin because there's a lot that happened this weekend. It feels like with it being the first week back after like a month, they just took a month of Drive to Survive and threw it in one weekend.
That is true. It feels like the lead up to this weekend, which of course was like 3 weeks, but the lead up to it, all the drama that happened during the race, before the race, after the race, they could probably do a half season on this race alone. Thankfully they won't, because that might be, a little boring to the rest of the races that happened, a little unfair, but it was a good race. In case you don't know, Charles Leclerc. But by the way, we have to just correct the record. I have to correct the record off the top. I said on a previous episode, Charles Leclerc. Apparently you can say Charles Leclerc. You can say both. He has given us permission to say both. We kind of dragged him a little bit for not going with Leclerc, but apparently he's cool with that. And that is the Monegasque way to say it. So, okay. Got it. Record corrected.
Leclerc.
There it is. That's how we'll be saying it from now on. But okay, let's talk about it. We're going to get into the headlines of the race. Obviously, Charles Leclerc won. It was a great day for Ferrari. But the biggest thing was Lando versus Max. Lando came back at Max. He was behind. He led the race, was on pole, thanks to a spin, little crashy crash from George Russell in qualifying. But he couldn't hold it, which is a thing that we've heard about Lando before. So, Deepti, your kind of thoughts on that? I guess we'll start the beginning. There's like the first Lando versus Max battle that we had at the very beginning of the race, the very first turn of the race. And then on lap, I believe it was 52, is when we had the other incident. So let's start with the first one. Deepti, what were your thoughts on just Lando and the whole Max thing at turn one?
I feel like we've seen this before. It seemed like Lando is not great getting into the first turn, and unless he makes that first turn like perfectly, he's going to struggle getting back into position. And I know we're talking about Lando and Max, but I think what happened between them allowed Charles to like sneak through. And then once he took the lead, he had it. But yeah, it seems like he gets fast starts, quick reaction times, but he's not clean off the start. And he still needs to like work on those first start, like, I don't even know, work on the technique, I guess, to get past the Max of that first turn and make a clean getaway in order to have clear in front of him. Yeah,
it's almost like he just either doesn't get it or he's too nice. And it was funny because after he saw what Max did in the sprint race to keep the lead, I'm like, just copy that. That's what you do. Dive down hard, take that corner. And instead, he just left the car link. So, Kyle, what were your thoughts on that whole thing?
It was one of those where it kind of felt like this was the key difference between a consistent race winner and champion and someone that has never been in that position before. That's kind of like what I gathered from it. And especially at a circuit where Max has dominated, I think it was up until the feature race, he'd won the other 5 races, both sprint and the feature race at Austin. So it's not as though he's comfortable at this racetrack. He's comfortable being in a championship battle. So I think for him, it was kind of like that experience showed, while with Lando, it's kind of like, all right, he's still new to this and he still hasn't developed that rougher side, that kind of I will do what it takes to win. And I don't care what it costs kind of thing that we see in a Max, in a Charles, in Lewis, in Fernando Alonso, like a lot of these guys, even George Russell, where you have more of that mentality.
Yeah, it's wild. It's almost like we're used to this in like the soccer space, right? Because a lot of players are friends, and women's soccer and men's soccer, like a lot of them are friends. But they say when they're on the pitch, like that's it, like we're not friends anymore. It's almost like Lando doesn't have that switch. Like, oh, Max is my buddy, he won't do this, and it's like, do you not know this man is ruthless? Donald, what your thoughts on this? It's like it keeps happening and it keeps blowing my mind.
Well, first of all, I think Lando Norris would love to go back to Austin to take turn 1 and throw it in the trash because he sucked at turn 1 all weekend long. If you remember the sprint, he locked up on turn 1 in the last lap to allow basically Ferrari to kind of undercut him and Sainz to go by. But on this one, we talked about turn 1 being one of the more interesting ones because there's always room for something to happen when you're going uphill, doing that wide hairpin turn, and then coming right back downhill with a couple of turns. And Norris just didn't figure that out from the sprint. And I don't know if it could also be that he clams up a little bit when he comes time to starting at the top, but he was not able to make that turn. And again, like you all said, Max is going to make that hard line and force you to do something stupid. And Lando just said, come on, do your thing so I can do something stupid. And he did. So it might be, like you said, might be the difference between champions and contenders. Lando has to figure that out. And the problem is it may not help him in the driver's race, but he'll need it for the Constructors' Championship because that's what almost at this point almost feels like that's what they need to focus on now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it was 52 points coming into the weekend, the difference between him and Max, and coming out of the weekend, what's it, 57 now? So, going the wrong direction, Lando. And you were on pole. You had opportunities to take some points. And okay, I guess we also need to talk about the second incident, which happened much later in the race, the end of the race. So it's almost like you had something that happened at the beginning of the race that led the Ferraris through, or at least Charles Leclerc. And then you had at the end of the race when he was had a better tire advantage. You know, his tires were fresher. His car was faster at that point of the race. And he was trying to get by Max. And you saw a lot of why Max is such a good driver. Max is extremely good defensively, uses all of his tools. I like the little battery display they had up there. Like Lando's was down like below 50% and Max was like at 90%.
90,
like he's just very, very smart in how he's using his extra battery to defend. But ultimately, he was passed. And then the stewards got involved. So let's talk about that incident because it frustrates me, but I'm going to hold my opinion because I'll talk about this for about 15 straight minutes and nobody wants to hear that. So basically, Lando tries to pass him on the outside. Both the cars go off the track. Lando passes him when they come back on the track. He is ahead of him, and Max is just kind of like, hey, he overtook me off track. But they were both off track, and then the stewards agreed and said 5-second penalty for Lando. They communicated that quite late for Lando to really do anything. You could have maybe immediately given the position back, but that wasn't the communication from the team as well. So he just needed to get 5 seconds ahead of Max to keep that position. He wasn't able to. There weren't that many laps left, and he ends up finishing below Max Verstappen after the 5-second penalty. So Kyle, your thoughts?
It was just a cluster of a mess that the FIA made because also George Russell more or less got penalized for the same thing earlier in the race. In that situation, George is the one that forced, I think it was Bottas out wide. He's the one that gets a penalty, and then we'll talk about the radio call later on. But you would think in that same scenario, Max forces Lando out wide. Even though Lando passed him, Max didn't get the penalty, it went to Lando. And I feel like that's one of those where it's either it's a racing incident or Max gets a penalty because you just applied that same logic over to George. And then the other part that I kind of go back and forth on is like, if McLaren didn't tell him right away, hey, give the position back, it sounds like on the radio they did tell him he had gotten the advantage or he gained the advantage because of it. So at the same time, maybe you could have done another swap. I know we in our chat, we were kind of in different opinions. I was in the opinion of if I was McLaren, I'd just say, just get the car as far ahead as possible, regardless. Like, yeah, maybe you should have given the position back, but at this point, get far enough ahead so that if there is a penalty, you don't get affected. The car should be fast enough to get 5 seconds on Max. We've seen it happen at a couple times. So I think for me, it was just more the lack of consistency for the FIA because I don't fully understand why they're making that decision. And if they made that decision with Max, why was it the opposite with George? And why does it seem like, and Toto Wolff was just like, this doesn't make sense. I know Stella had a long quote that kind of walked through and he's saying like, it just once it felt like one of those, the FIA is benefiting Max/Red Bull. And that's not, no one understands why. It's the why that doesn't make sense. But then also with McLaren, it kind of again speaks to the lack of experience of being in this kind of situation where maybe they could have done a better job of communicating. Maybe Lando, and they could have done that, but at the end of the day, there should not have been a penalty. I think it's one of those, they went racing, whatever it is, what it is, and go deal with it. Because there was also not that much time where the penalty was applied. And again, it just came so late that it was like, what, the final lap or the second to last lap? So at that point, it's like, well, crap.
Yeah, I think that was the timing of it was also very strange as well. And I do think that we have seen in other races when incidents like this happen, especially late in the race, those stewards will kind of wait to hear from both drivers after the race and then talk about it and then make a decision. Now, sometimes that can be annoying because you get the whole podium celebration and all of a sudden they tell you, don't worry about it. Whatever, the person you saw spraying champagne. See what you saw. Yeah, they weren't there. They weren't supposed to be there. But Deepti, what do you think about like that incident and how the stewards handled it? Because it was really, I think Kyle's right in terms of inconsistencies. We saw that a number of times and who was getting penalties for that turn in particular, who was getting pushed off track versus who was overtaking on track and getting the penalty. It felt very inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. It's reminding me of in soccer and football, like what is a handball? In this case, it's like what's overtaking? What's the refs, the stewards don't have a consistent idea of what's what, and it seems like they're also trying to kind of figure it out as they go along. But regardless of when they said, like when they decided to give the penalty, I think it is on McLaren and the team to have a plan A, B, C of like, okay, you know, we only have like 4 laps left, 5 laps left. Is that enough time for you to like give that back the position and immediately try to overtake again? Which I think would have been the right decision because, like we said, Lando had, I think it was about 6 laps less on his tires, so 6 laps fresher. And he was definitely faster than Max, so I think that would have been enough time for him to get a position back. Or tell him right away, like, okay, push. If you're not going to give back the position, push to gain as many seconds as you can. Part of me is thinking that maybe they thought he might get a second 5-second penalty and 10 seconds would have been too much to kind of build a gap in those last few laps because of the track limits thing, which Lando didn't end up getting because I think he was only out in track limits 3 times instead of the 4th. But yeah, it's a shame that once again, it seems like McLaren is just not quite there as a winning team. Just they hesitate too long, and their lack of decision making and quick decision making hurts them in the end, and they're not allowed to get points. Or yeah.
I am so glad you brought that up because that's another thing that I kind of like. The FIA put themselves in like this weird position where you judge this as like an illegal overtake, 5-second penalty because you don't give the position back. But as I understood it, the track limit warning was actually removed from Lando because he was forced off track. And so you can't be track limits if you're forced off track. So if you're forced off track and can't overtake, then how does it would apply in one situation, but you're not forced off track in another situation? I don't understand the logic. So Donald, talk me through like that. And then also just the whole issue with the FIA kind of coming up with rules or following the rules kind of, it feels like at Red Bull's beck and call, like however Red Bull wants it to suit Max's driving style. It seems like the rules are written to maximize an already dominant driver, but there's not a whole lot of racing logic in the rules as well.
So McLaren messed up the cardinal rule of boxing. In boxing, if you're going up against the heavyweight champion, what is the number one rule about going up against a heavyweight champion? Leave no doubt and never let the referees decide it. Yeah. That's what happened. They basically went in there. And if you think about it, if you hear the calls, they basically were under the assumption that, you know, everyone else was, right? That, hey, he got forced off the track. Max went off the track with him. They were arguing basically that nobody should be penalized, that it should be Rubens racing and let it go. Or at the very minimum, Max should be getting the 5-second penalty because logic would apply that. But logic never applies to that when it comes to Red Bull and FIA. Like that they should have understood that. And whether it was, and the thing was, they didn't realize that until the last lap. Norris was like 4.3 seconds is what they said ahead. So he was almost there. He probably needed another half lap and he would have gotten enough to be okay. But the idea that they were just going to leave it in the hands of FIA and think FIA was going to do the right thing with regards to Max Verstappen, that is something that they have never done. We have this whole podcast because of one particular race where they did not do the right thing with Max Verstappen.
Yes.
Don't think that's going to happen in 2024. So I think they really messed up there, at least in that sense, in assuming that they were in the right and that was going to prevail. In this case, it's never fair because FIA never applies it fairly. If you think Gasly had the same thing, he got a 5-second penalty in the race. Yep. George Russell got a 5-second rest. They should have seen the logic and go, these two guys got this, but it did involve Red Bull drivers. So I know what's going to happen over here. Let me adjust my approach. And they just didn't do that. But I think in the case of Lando, like he didn't really have Lando, the driver, didn't have a lot to do with that. I mean, it was so late in the race that he either tries to gun it and hope that he can get the 5 seconds, or he gives the place back. And they're really, in my opinion, it would have been close, but it might not have been enough time to do it, because I think when they were talking about, when Max was saying, oh, he should give the spot back, it was the second to last lap. Of course you would say that on the second to last lap, because there's only one DRS moment that you have to withstand. And he was doing a great job actually all day at withstanding some of the DRS overtakes by other people. So he's sitting there in a situation going, yeah, do the DRS thing and see what happens. I know I can get out of the situation. Lando knew he couldn't get out of that situation, which is why he tried to go for the 5 seconds and he just missed.
Yeah, I think I'm with Deepti in terms of like Max Verstappen is so hard to pass, especially when the rules kind of benefit him as well. His method of driving, he forces you to go around the outside, and that's really what we're talking about. If you're going around the outside, it seems like Max can just push you completely off, and there's nothing you can do about it. You either have to brake and stay behind him, because if you pass him, then you get a 5-second penalty. So he makes it very difficult to pass. He almost sounded like a kid in school. When Lando passed him, he was just like, he passed me off track. He can't do that. It's like tattletale stuff on the radio. Yeah. I was like, yeah, but he knew exactly what he was doing. And that's the only way Lando was going to get it. And you can see how good Max is at defending, because Lando was in DRS range with like 10 laps to go. And it was only like lap 52 that he actually ended up making that move. And it's really, really difficult to pass him. So I'm kind of with Deepti, like, don't let him by. Just cover the 5-second penalty, because it's going to be hard as hell to pass him again, especially pass him and avoid another 5-second penalty, or a position you're going to have to give back anyway. Okay, I do want to talk about the winners in this race, because it's kind of important. We got a Ferrari one too, but I do want to read the quote from Andrea Stella from McLaren, because I do think he has a good measured perspective on this. So he said, we checked the video multiple times. It's just going straight. It's Verstappen just going off track as much as Lando is, just giving no chance for Lando to complete the maneuver, which, side note, how the British spell maneuver is bonkers to me. Way too many vowels. But anyway, if I were a journalist, it really does. If I were a journalist, I would have done a bit of statistics. How many times has Max used this way for defending? Both cars go off track, so I think both cars are gaining an advantage. If there's an advantage to be gained. For us, this maneuver was at least neutral, but when I saw that there was an investigation, I was pretty sure that because Max pushed Lando off track. In fact, we told immediately, Oscar, make sure you close 5 seconds on Max, because there could be a position at stake, which, to kind of go back to Donald's point and Kyle's point as well, André, my guy, logic, I understand, but you are dealing with a Red Bull. Not only are you fighting Max and Red Bull, you're fighting the referees too. It's just what it is. Until
on the
it
radio,
changes.
On the radio, they were saying, "Don't worry, it's going to be 5 on Max," and Lando has to operate based on that. Although, again, he should be thinking, "Y'all stupid. This is not. Right. That's not how they're going to do this. They're gonna punish me. So let me get going here." But the whole team just kind of, had a brain lapse and said, "Hey, they're going to do the right thing." And you can't leave it in the hands of the judges.
Yeah, they've showed time and time again that when Max and Red Bull are involved, you are going to the likelihood of you getting the call is very low.
Yeah.
When you're overtaking, if you're on the outside, in order to not give the spot back, it says that a significant part of the car has to be ahead when you get to the apex, which is the middle part of the turn, right? I liked there was a talk between Christian Horner and Jensen Button afterwards, and I liked Jensen Button's argument. Basically, he questioned the rule as a whole, and he argued that it gives more to the defending car. It gives leeway, I think he said, on the inside.
Yeah.
Because, like, basically he was like, Max knows what he has to do, and he knows that he can just lift off the brakes at a moment, and he doesn't have to make the corner. Usually he'll be trying to make the corner brake more, but by not doing that and pushing the car outside, he will be ahead at the apex farther than the outside car. So there's no way that the outside car will be able to be ahead, and he knows that he will have to give the position back. So it's kind of like a loophole in a way that obviously someone as smart as Max will be able to take advantage of. So I think that's interesting. Jensen Button is just saying maybe change the rule as a whole. Maybe that shouldn't be the way to like determine whether a spot should be given back or not.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up as well, because it is like, not only is Max allowed to kind of do that, but because he's not going to get penalized for going off track or running another car off track, his braking point, like, he can just gun it. He can break the latest because it doesn't necessarily matter. You're always going to, like, if you're trying to stay on track, he's going to have to brake a lot earlier if a car gets alongside him on the outside. He's just going to have to brake earlier because you have to stay on track and you can't push a car. But because you can do both of those things, he can wait forever to hit the brakes and then go off track and make the turn. And they're like, he was at the apex first. Well, of course he was.
Yeah. Like, he didn't try not to be. Yeah, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
He didn't try to stay on. So
yeah, it is wild. They absolutely need to review it. But also, as Donald said, they've shown no appetite to do that when it comes to Max and Red Bull. So you just kind of know what it is. Okay.
And it is only Red Bull because Yuki Tsunoda got the same penalty that Lando did. So
that is true. It's not even Red Bull Jr. that gets this. It is just the main team that gets this. Yeah, fair. Good point. Okay, let's talk about the race. The top two. Charles Leclerc winning the race. Carlos Sainz, who had a very good weekend. He was feisty this weekend. I liked it. Feisty Carlos Sainz this weekend. That Ferrari, I thought, and I think we even said this in the Austin preview, that Ferrari was bringing their last update package to Austin. But I heard after the race that wasn't true. And so I'm like, if this is not a car that was updated and it's doing this, the math changes in a lot of different ways, because that Ferrari was gone. Like, once Charles was out there, they were talking about Max just needs to stay within DRS range. And then 5 laps later, he was 3 seconds down. And it was okay, well, Charles is gone. And Carlos was also, it took him a little bit of time to get through everybody, but then he was gone as well. So, Donald, Ferrari, just absolutely hooping. Your thoughts on their weekend, or at least their performance in the Grand Prix?
I think both, right? If you think about Sainz getting 2-2 in both the sprint and the Grand Prix, they did well this weekend. And it's funny, the car was so fast that at a certain point they were playing cat and mouse with each other for several laps. You could see they were kind of going back and forth, and you kind of, if you're a Ferrari fan, I'm sure you were holding your breath yo, Ferrari, you guys don't do this well. Stop. And then at a certain point they're kind of all right, we're done playing games. Let's go win this race. And they went and collectively they went, and they kept talking about how Carlos Sainz being kind of the odd man out of Ferrari next year with Lewis Hamilton coming in, that he's kind of racing for himself. But I thought he did a great job at racing for himself and for his teammate. And once he got into second and Leclerc was in first, I thought he did great at kind of basically pushing Leclerc to his limits, and then also holding off everybody behind him. So at a certain point, you kind of looked and said, if you think about it, in the race, they kind of said, oh, we haven't talked about the leader for 10 laps. But yeah, that's Charles Leclerc. He's winning the race right now. They just kind of said, okay, in other news, let's go to these other battles for positioning. And that was in all part due to both Leclerc and Sainz racing with each other. And then also at a certain point going, okay, let's get as many points as we possibly can with each other, but let's win this race for Ferrari. And because of that, they are now really inserted themselves into, the second place race in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, it was funny. Ferrari was getting the 2023 Max Verstappen treatment. He's up there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, he's up by 20.
Exactly.
Back here in 16th.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say about the Constructors' race, Ferrari is now 8 points behind Red Bull. Red Bull has 504 points. Ferrari has 496. So, and honestly, they're not even that far behind McLaren, who has 544. So, Constructors' race is now a three-way race, I think. And then similarly with driver standings, Leclerc is catching up to Lando. Leclerc is 22 points behind Lando. So Lando
Only
is not
22
guaranteed.
now?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, we thought Lando might have a chance to walk down Max, but he could end up finishing
He
third.
could end up finishing third. So they made it interesting.
Well, it was interesting because with the Ferrari, it was kind of like because Max and Lando were just fighting so much, it was like they had their battle at turn one. Charles was just like, I'm just gonna sneak right past you. Don't worry about that. Thanks, guys. Thanks for that. And Carlos Sainz is like,
look at that guy over there. Don't worry about us. Look at that guy. It was a brilliant move because they were just kind of like all of a sudden they were like, and Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. Oh yeah,
Like,
Sainz and Leclerc passed them already there for a second.
But then it was also I think it was just Ferrari had an excellent weekend. I mean, they were 1-2, I think, in the one practice session. I mean, Carlos gets second in the sprint. Charles got fourth in the sprint, and he could have gotten Lando if he had another lap, probably. Then you get the 1-2. I think it was just a very good weekend, and Ferrari undercutting Max was really the thing that I think like turned it around. And we thought Carlos Sainz was going to have to retire the car. He was talking about how he was smelling fuel or something. Like he was like, I don't know if this car is going to make it, guys. We'll see. And then just
he had me
ho-hum. Yeah. Had everyone fooled. Ho-hum. Oh, yeah, we'll just take second. But yeah, it was kind of one of those. Everything went Ferrari's way. And with upgrades or without upgrades, that's as good of a weekend as you probably could have. I mean, other than winning the sprint race.
You know, sometimes there are those memes where like two people are like just like scrapping, like battling, and they'll just be somebody chilling like on a bench, like eating some food or having lunch or whatever, just completely unbothered. That's what it felt like at turn one. Charles Leclerc was just like, y'all do what y'all do. I'm just gonna mind my own business, sneak on over here. Like, yeah, everybody's paying attention to you two scrapping, and I'm just gonna go ahead and take first in this race and then never give it back, which was amazing. All right, Mercedes. That's what prompted the deep sigh. Shout out to George for getting it back, but we heard that they brought updates to the car. They thought this was like they had good performance at one stretch, kind of in the middle of the season. They're trying to get back to that. Thought that maybe they were going to have, with Red Bull slipping a little bit, they were going to have an opportunity to start getting up there and maybe battling. Because at one point in the season, I believe there were like 6 different race winners within a short span of races, and Ferrari had both their drivers on the podium on the top step as well. So it was kind of impressive, and you were thinking, okay, Mercedes can't be that far away. You look at Austin, Mercedes is far away. Donald, what the hell happened to Mercedes?
I don't know, man. I mean, you know me, but I picked Lewis to win the race because of
that may have been why I went to you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that mea culpa. And to be fair, I think Lewis the whole week was kind of like, yo, this car is just not showing something, and he could tell. I think we mentioned this when we were chatting about the practice, about how his car in particular seemed to have like the camera feed that shows, usually it's a fairly smooth feed. Like it's not like jumping or anything. You can show that the car is very smooth and no porpoising or anything. His feed, like the camera was just shaking the entire way. And you could tell that he was fighting the car on every single twist and turn. And so maybe we should have known then. And if you placed any wagers, you would have readjusted your life. But I think when it came to Mercedes, they didn't have a game plan. It felt like strategy wasn't there. And then when whatever strategy they had blew up in the form of Lewis crashing during qualifying, then you have, or not during qualifying, during the practice or whatever, he like at a certain point, he's like, okay, I'll give everything to Russell, and Russell do, but then Russell smashes his car, and now you're like, what are we doing here? And it doesn't feel like they came in with the particular game plan that was necessary for this track, and they just kind of, for lack of a better word, like winged it, and it didn't work. And quite the contrary, like they might have had the worst weekend of the top 4, like constructors, and that's what Sergio Perez just doing, waddling down in like 10th, 11th. Like, yeah. And so, and the race is just, I mean, Russell did well to kind of fight through it. He started, towards the back and had to work his way all the way up. And Hamilton was doing the same thing. You kind of thought, oh, they're going to, they're salvaging this thing. They may get some points and call that a wash of a weekend, but they'll get some points and, maybe stay in the thick of things. Lewis crashing ended all that.
Yeah, Deepti, we talked a little bit about on a factory reset, all the different things that interact with the car. And when you bring updates to the car, especially if you pack a bunch of new stuff on the car, you don't necessarily know how all of it's going to interact with each other. And it feels like that may have been what caught Mercedes out, because once the car started getting on track, Lewis spun, then they both spin. George and Lewis spun in practice. Everybody was spinning in practice, but those two in particular, Lewis gained 5 places at the start of the race, but then ended up in gravel and out of the race. George, again, in qualifying, like Donald said as well, that's the why qualifying was ended early, because he spun spun and ran into the wall, like crashed his car, and they had to rebuild it overnight. Like, Deepti, your thoughts on just like what happened, what may have happened to Mercedes in this new update they put on that clearly didn't work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm like, technically, I'm not sure what would have happened, but I think because it was a sprint race weekend and having just one practice session hurt them, and getting all these updates and not being able to adjust between practice sessions and getting used to the car initially. And it just seemed like they never jived, and it wasn't working from the beginning. So either these updates, something went wrong there, or they just haven't had enough time in the car to get used to what it feels like, what all the new updates feel like. So, but I find it interesting. I think the place that George crashed and the place that Lewis spun out was in the exact same spot. I don't remember exactly which turn it was, but there's something there where they locked up and spun out. So if they had with those extra 2 practice sessions, maybe they would have been able to catch that earlier and fix whatever the issue was before the race. But unfortunately, that is not how sprint weekends go, and it just didn't work out for Mercedes this time.
It was one of those where Lewis was talking about how the car was just oversteering massively during the sprint race, and he was just having that battle. And George was mentioning that he was fine for the first couple laps, and then his tires just out of nowhere just fell apart. And he was like, maybe I got the setup wrong. I talked with Lewis. He had the opposite problem. Like, Lewis's rears are gone. Mine were fine. So it just seemed like neither of them could figure out the car. And when you only have one practice session, I think that is a big reason for that. But even then, like George mentioned, like his tires are gone. Like he was, once the Ferraris passed him, he was a distant fifth. Like it's like, oh, you look and it's like, oh, fifth isn't too bad. But it was not even we're battling. He was just kind of on his own. Same with Lewis. It was just like, there was never any chance of them being a serious threat. And then the premier race, maybe they would have done better because we saw George go all the way up to P6. Lewis had made up a lot of places, and both of them had started from the pits. And neither of them really had that opportunity. It's just one of those, again, where it's like, what happened to this car? Like, it looked like in the summer after Silverstone and Belgium, it's like, okay, Mercedes has gotten it together. We might not win constructors, but they can make a run at, second or third. And now it's like, yeah, they're going to get fourth. It's probably going to be like that for the rest of the year.
The one thing about it is as you mentioned, Russell has one problem. Hamilton has the opposite problem. So at a certain point, like, who do you turn to? Because they can't fix the car, 2 separate ways. That shows that they just didn't know what was going on with the car, or whatever fixes and changes they applied just weren't applied the right way. And you're left with guys trying to make sense of the senseless. And it's when both are struggling, it'd be one thing if they were struggling with the same thing, but the fact that they're talking about 2 different things, like, I'm sure the guys in the paddock are like, well, how do we fix this? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think they do either.
Lewis literally said from the sprint race, I don't think it gives us any hope.
Yeah.
Well, Lewis thought it was the upgrades that could be blamed for this, but then I think Toto and other people on the Mercedes team were like, no, it's not the upgrades. We're going to keep the same upgrades for this weekend's race, the upcoming one in Mexico. And Toto Wolff said that he reckons the problems are more about the track itself and how the car drove on this like kind of bumpier track at Austin. So it sounds like they're not going to really change anything, not going to do anything with the upgrades, and hopefully things will work better in Mexico. But yeah, they think it's more about like a mechanical and aero issue with the track itself and like how that all works together rather than the upgrades in the software and whatnot.
The thing that frustrated me so much about Mercedes, because I think you're absolutely right, Deepti, the one practice session didn't give them enough time to really test these upgrades, let the drivers know how you have to drive with these new upgrades on, because it's not just a thing of having new parts on the car. Okay, cool. Now I know the car. You have to learn the car all over again. It does different things, different depending on input, steering, braking, all of that. And they didn't have enough time. So maybe they did too much too soon when you're just going to have one practice session. But then Lewis was out in Q1 of Grand Prix qualifying because they put him out late on a lot of it, and he got a time deleted, but they put him out late on a lot of traffic as well. And it's just like, what are y'all doing? You're a seasoned team. Like you're better than this. You know better than this. Like bad strategy, bad calls with the update, and especially like having a track like Austin. It's not like they're unfamiliar with Austin. Lewis has won there a ton of times. They know Austin. They know that track. Some bits of it were repaved, but there are some bumps that you have to account for as well. Like it just seemed like these are mistakes that newer teams make. This isn't a mistake. These aren't mistakes, a collection of mistakes that you expect a team as seasoned as Mercedes to make. And that's what was so confusing and frustrating to me about it, because all of this was avoidable. like all of this was avoidable. You don't need all your drivers just spinning all over the place in Austin. Like you could have been, like both of them were in contention. Like Russell won pole in sprint. Like that's where they should be. That's how good the car is. And of course, there were a couple cars that could have gotten on top of him for pole, but he wasn't going to get pushed down that far, that many places. So like that's where like that Mercedes needs to be in the middle of Red Bull and McLaren. That's really where it is in terms of its ultimate performance and the two drivers that they have. And the fact that we didn't get that in Austin is just ridiculous to me. So I don't know what's going on with Mercedes, but they need to figure it out, and they don't have much time to figure it out. Okay, I want to wrap up our kind of like headline portion by talking about hilarious radio calls. If you listen to the intro, we love radio calls. It's one of the things that makes us laugh about this sport, and they're great. So I want us all to talk about one each. And so I'm going to start with Yuki. Just because I don't even have like a direct quote from Yuki. I just know that he was mad as hell on the radio for like the majority of the race, especially when Liam Lawson was ahead of him. He was questioning his engineers, like, or his race engineer, like, how did this happen? Like, he was really like grilling him, like he had like that one light bulb swinging like in an interrogation room. He was like, how did this happen? And it's like, you've been on track and you just spun. Like, what do you mean? How did this happen? So I know he was mad at the strategy, but even with strategy, like you weren't really there. So I get being mad. Maybe you didn't get the preferred strategy, but also there was enough unfortunate performance for you to like not be grilling your race engineer. That was really unfortunate from Yuki. Deepti, which one did you love?
Okay, one of my favorites was from Carlos Sainz this weekend. Carlos's engineer gave him an instruction saying, more phase 1 brake release for turn 1. And Carlos just responds, I don't know what that means. And then keeps driving. There was no explanation. They didn't tell us what it was. He was just like, that's what it is. It was just like, it's like that Blades of Glory reference. No one knows what it means. It's provocative.
Yes. It was so good because he said it so matter of fact, like, I don't know what that means.
Like, I don't know what that means. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah. It was great. Kyle, what was one of yours?
I know it's listed on here, but I enjoyed the Fernando Alonso meltdown that he was having when battling Liam Lawson and it's in the social media part, and we'll talk about the gloomy boy, but him just intentionally calling it an AlphaTauri, and it sounded like he was saying it like almost as a slur at one point.
Yeah.
He was just like, oh, you're just very upset. And I'm like, okay, well, like, I don't know. You said it with real like ER vibes to it when he said AlphaTauri. I don't know how to explain it, but I would say that was my favorite.
There was a lot of venom in that AlphaTauri. It was really like
he said that from the base of his toenails. Like,
it was amazing. Donald, which one you got?
Yeah, so it was early in the race, I guess, or I guess the middle of the race when George Russell got his 5-second penalty for forcing someone off the track, and he clearly didn't think anything was going to happen to him, so he just kept driving. And then his team radioed in and said, "Oh, by the way, Russell, you got a 5-second penalty for running someone off the track." He just goes, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" It just said that, and they just like disappeared for 3 laps. And then like 3 laps later, Toto Wolff comes back and he's like, oh, yeah, no, you got 5 seconds for, doing that thing earlier. And he just said it so nonchalant as if it was like, yo, $200 for dinner. And he was like, wait, what? Like, I thought it was paid. Oh, that thing? Nah, I wasn't paid. You actually owe $200. It's kind of how they did it. But like Russell was just like, where did this come from? Like, that was years ago that happened. Why are we talking about this now? I'm 14 laps past that. So I thought it was just funny because it just seemed like, to add to all of Mercedes' problems, it was a lack of communication or just a delayed form of communication by letting him know what was going on in the race.
Yeah, I love the octave that George hit on that what. Yeah. It was extremely high. Yes, it was extremely high. It was amazing. And I also have to throw in an honorable mention to Lewis yelling at Bono to not talk to him in the braking zone. Like, y'all been together for a long time, and how does Bono not know this already? But it was just like, yeah, Lewis was clearly frustrated all weekend. All right, let's take a quick break, and then let's talk about the weekend overall. We're going to get to our Zoomy boy and gloomy boy, and then there was a lot of hilarious stuff that happened that was posted on social media, some by F1 themselves, and others they may not want to sanction the video, but it was funny nonetheless, and we're going to talk about it. So we'll be right back. Okay. It was a sprint weekend, which means we have 2 races to discuss, 2 qualifying sessions to discuss, 1 practice session to discuss. And we focused, of course, the first part on the Grand Prix because why would we not? But now I want to open it up to just the weekend overall. Any thoughts in any of the session that you thought was interesting or wanted to talk about? I will start with you, Kyle. What did you see from anything during the weekend that you feel like we need to discuss?
It was clear that these drivers were on a long break and not really used to driving a car because that practice session, everybody and everyone was spinning in some way, shape, or form at all parts of the track. No one seemed to have any idea. It's like we forgot how to drive. So I was going to say the practice session, and because it was the only one, I was kind of like, I don't know what to take out of these times because half of them were spinning. So who knows?
It was a hot ass mess. Every single time they went and they were like, oh, another driver's like, what is happening with everybody? What is going on? Yeah, it was a wild practice session and not really what you want heading in when you only have one. Then you're like, well, how do you fix the car after that? You really don't know exactly. It's hard to troubleshoot with just one practice session. Deepti, what were your thoughts on anything that happened during the weekend?
It's funny. So, right, like a few hours after the practice session, they go into sprint qualifying. And there we saw a bit of surprise. Haas is doing something in their home race. Both of them get into Q3, no more spinning, and they zoomed that time. So, and then we saw like Mercedes do a little bit something special and good. This was probably their best moment of the weekend was when Russell got pole. Yeah. But yeah, sprint quali, I think Haas was the winner of that, honestly, for getting both cars into the final session.
Yeah, Haas. We talked about it a bit in the preview. Like, what is Haas going to do? What is like a good weekend for Haas? And I was kind of downplaying the fact that both cars could get points, but they did. Yeah. It was incredible. So yeah, I'm here for it. Even though again, we'll talk about them adding U's to their thing and calling themselves a home team, which is actually very funny because they say it's a home race, but like, do they really care? Like, do they really care? Do Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Ayo Komatsu, do they really care? I don't know if they care.
It's just location. And they're like,
exactly.
Yeah. But I do want to say, like, they did have a really good weekend, actually. Haas, P8 for Nico in the race was their best ever finish at a home Grand Prix. And Haas has now scored in 4 consecutive races. That's like for the first time in 6 or 7 years. I think 2018 is what I saw.
Oof. That is genuinely incredible because they do not have a lot of resources. We'll talk about more of their partnership with Toyota, but that it's really like a Franken-Haas car. Like that thing, it has a Ferrari engine. It's built in Kannapolis. They also do some production, some manufacturing at the Ferrari spot where Ferrari gave them like a little corner to work in. And that's really what they have. And now they're going to have Cologne, Germany, I believe is where Toyota has a base. And so they're going to just piece this thing together. Oh, Dallara as well, which is another one in Italy. That's for the chassis. So they like really just Frankenstein this thing together, and it's performing better than a lot of teams who have a ton of funding. So it's kind of incredible the way this is working. So I'll be interested to see what Toyota can do, how they can help streamline. Donald, your thoughts? Like what did you want to point out during the weekend overall?
I think if I look back at this race, the highlight of the weekend, or at least the thing I remember the most, is that final lap of the sprint where it's Lando, Leclerc, Sainz trying to battle for a second, and Lando looks like he's got it in the bag, and he locks up on turn one, allows Sainz to pass him, and then Leclerc's coming around. It's a nice little set of racing for a half lap. Then Leclerc locks up. Then he almost crashes into Lando and into Carlos. And all of a sudden it just kind of evens out from there. But for like a half lap, there were some actual incredible moments, but also some good racing between that. But the Lando lockup, I'll know he wants that back. Yeah, the stuff with Verstappen and in the actual Grand Prix is one thing, but these sprint points also matter in the Constructors' Championship. And for him to, just drop from assured second to having to really fend off for third is probably a disappointment for him. But it was an incredible moment. It was like an and one mixtape type of ooh and ah coming from the crowd. It was like, usually don't hear the crowd like do a ooh, like a reaction ooh on the broadcast, but you could hear it on that broadcast. You could hear it felt like all 200,000 or whatever that were there collectively were like, dang, Lando, like, what are you doing? So yeah, that was the highlight of the weekend for me.
Yeah, that was a quite good one. I love the racing that we had in so many of these instances. Like in the sprint, Carlos was really going at Charles as well. Like that was really fun to watch. It was obviously Ferrari teammates, and I just wonder if like Ferrari was like, "Can y'all stop? Like, can y'all chill out?" Which is actually why I think in the Grand Prix that when Charles was way out in front, he said like, "Don't put me under pressure." I was like, I think he was like, if you put me anywhere near Carlos, he's gonna go at me. Like I've got the wind sewn up. Don't do that to me. Like, I'm good. Don't put me near that honey badger. He's on it. He's on it this weekend. Just let me have this. I've earned it. Like I'm good. But yeah, I thought that was also great. Also, we need to talk about Liam Lawson versus Fernando Alonso. That was extremely hilarious.
That was
so hot.
That was one of those where it was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. First of all, I was not expecting these two drivers to be battling in this position. I figured based off of the drivers and the cars, you wouldn't expect that. But at the same time, it was just one of those squabbling. They battled at the sprint race, and then Alonso's talking to Lawson after. He's basically going to say, like, oh, I'll get you back, and then he gets Lawson back again. I was like, all right, this felt like kind of this generational, like, when you want to try and fight your dad, and it's a bad idea. Like, you might win that battle, but your dad's still going to win the war. That's exactly what this was.
Or it's just like, you sit there like, oh, Dad, I can take you. And Dad's like, oh, really? Like, he has that kind of like, I wish you would. Like, because don't think for 1 second that because I'm twice your age, I can't send you into next week. And that's how Alonso felt when he probably called the car an AlphaTauri car. He's probably like, look, but don't make me ground you. Like that was the strength that he had.
I think it's funny, Alonso obviously against Liam Lawson in the sprint race, but he wasn't having a good time against Franco in the main race either. I think Franco Colapinto got the best of Alonso at least once. He overtook him. And so it's you're saying like he's like the dad you don't want to fight, but to me he's almost like the grandpa who's like, these kids, like they're ruining everything. It's like Alonso against the young guys,
just shaking his fist at the clouds.
Curse you kids.
The thing is, though, for me, like, yeah, it's kind of like fighting your dad, but also you can't really mess with Gen Z. Like, they're really chill, and they have they're really sharp. They have ways of getting you. So Liam Lawson said some really funny stuff afterwards when they were talking about what happened with him. And Liam Lawson, there's an ESPN article. He said, I don't know. He said he would screw me, and I guess he kept his word. I don't know. He was really upset. I'm not sure why. We were racing for P16. I don't know why he was so upset. It is what it is. Hopefully he can get over it. This was extremely hilarious. And he said, I understand he had a pretty horrible race, so I can understand why he's upset. But if I did anything wrong, I would have gotten a penalty. And it's like, I guess you can't argue with that logic, but it's also extremely funny because Alonso was just hot and Liam was like, hopefully he gets over it.
It's like, we're fighting for P16. Like,
exactly.
What are we even fighting for?
It's like that passive aggressive kind of shade, but
It's the meme of like the dude getting the medal, popping the champagne and doing it, and he's like in ninth place.
It was excellent. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to talk about from the weekend overall before we get to our Zoomy boy and gloomy boy of the weekend?
So we thought for a split second, maybe if you look like a McLaren, you'll drive like a McLaren, and Alpine miserably failed.
True.
I was going to mention that.
However,
Gasly.
Gasly did start off.
It looked promising.
It did.
And then reality set in.
Right.
I mean, I think it was Ocon too. Like both times, both qualifying, they're like, "Oh, they're about to do something." Never mind, they didn't qualify well. Gasly did get 7th. He qualified 7th, and then like immediately off the first turn, you're like, "Never mind." Like that's done. So yeah, I said that they have been struggling lately in Gasly, especially. I picked him to be my gloomy boy. He's not my gloomy boy for this week, but he tried to earn it for sure. So
I have this F1 article from Formula that has some fun facts from the weekend. So if it's okay, I'm going to read a couple of them out because I love fun facts. But apparently this was Ferrari's first 1-2 finish in the United States since Indianapolis 2006, which was with Michael Schumacher and Felipe Massa. And I guess we have to say happy birthday to Charles Leclerc. Last week he celebrated birthday, celebrated with this win. Good weekend for him. Good week. What else I have? This ends a 7-race run without a podium finish for Carlos. So I guess he was in somewhat of a slump. I don't know if you would call it a slump, but people are expecting him to podium. This gets him back on there.
Well, he was going to be on the podium in Baku, right?
Yeah.
And then him and Perez had that crash. So wow.
Also, back to Charles, he had only ever led 4 laps at Austin before today. So was not really ever close to winning it, I suppose, until this time.
Yeah.
What else is here? I'm just going through. Yeah, okay, we'll get to this in the social media thing, but Franco Colapinto, he actually had the fastest lap until very late in the race, about 3 laps to go, I believe. That leads to a funny quote from him afterwards. And then, unfortunately, this is Lewis's first time not finishing a race in the US in his entire career.
Yeah.
Not much of a fun fact, but definitely
It's not fun at all. I don't like that fact at all. There's nothing fun about that. All right, let's get to it. Zoomy boy and gloomy boy. Let's get to it. Zoomy boy of the weekend. So this is, you can make it about the race of the Grand Prix if you want, but you can make it about the entire weekend. I think I did some of that as well in mine. Kyle, let's start with you. Who is your Zoomy boy of the weekend?
I will give it to George Russell. I was kind of torn between him and Colapinto, but I figured George Russell went from P19 up to P6. He salvaged what was basically a terrible weekend for Mercedes overall. He was still 5th in the sprint weekend. So for George himself, it wasn't it could have been much, much worse. And the fact that he was able to take that car all the way, not only to points, but a good P6, I'll give it to him because it felt as though when the races mattered, he did everything he could. Plus crashing on quali was, maybe, I'm not saying he intentionally did it to stop Max from getting pole, but it was very coincidental that, let me just crash right here and stop Max from getting any chance. But no, I think he was the only bright spot for Mercedes for the weekend, so I'll give it to him.
If Mercedes wasn't such a hot ass mess the entire weekend, I could believe in that conspiracy theory, but I think it just happened because the car was bad. Deepti, who is your Zoomy boy?
I'm going to give it to 2 guys this weekend. I'm going to give it to 2 of the young ones, Liam Lawson and Franco Colapinto. They both got points in the main race. In qualifying, I guess they both improved from their qualifying spot. So Franco Colapinto qualified and he was P17 and then ended up finishing P10. So he made up 7 spots. Like I mentioned before, he drove really well, had a great overtakes, especially one over Fernando Alonso, which is funny. He bested his young versus old and that. And then Liam Lawson started in P15 and ended P9. So he also made up several spots and got himself into the points, had a good race. Yeah, and for driving in a Williams and in VCARB, Visa Cash App Red Bull. Always have to say the whole name. I think it was great weekends for both of them.
Yeah, fair. And Donald, your Zoomy boy.
So mine is Carlos Sainz, and it's because, as Deepti mentioned, after the 8 races, he finally gets back on the podium. He's second in the sprint, second in the Grand Prix. He had those car issues with the fuel smell in the Grand Prix and kind of fought that off to help Ferrari get max points and also almost win, right? There was a point where Ferrari's cars were doing so well that they were just kind of racing each other until they decided to, like, okay, we've gotten that out of our system. Let's focus on the race. And I thought Sainz did beautifully in both races to get second and get, help again, get Ferrari max points.
Yeah, I love that. I love all of those. I'm going to kind of bend the rules a little bit like Red Bull, like Deepti did in terms of the Zoomy Boy of the week. I'm going with Haas, just overall. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hulkenberg, 7th and 8th. They got 3 points for that in the sprint race. In the Grand Prix, Hulk got 8th, which was 4 points. K-Mag was 11th. He got stuck in a little bit of traffic, so he probably should have gotten into the points as well. But still, overall, they got enough points as a team to jump ahead of Visa, Cash App, Zelle, Venmo, RB, all of that nonsense in the constructors. And just, again, mentioning the funding that Haas has and how it's not on par with a lot of it. Now, this is not to glorify that. Gene Haas and others should be spending money to compete in this sport, but they're maximizing a lot of the resources they have. The drivers are doing excellent. They finally came to Austin with an upgrade that actually works. Remember last year, they're like, this is our big update package, and they were trash. They came with some updates in this one, and they absolutely worked. So shout out to Haas from me. Zoomy boys, 2 Zoomy boys from me for Haas. Okay, time to get sad. Sad boy hours, as Megan says. Gloomy boy. Donald, who is your gloomy boy of the weekend?
So Fernando Alonso was my pick to be the Zoomy boy in the preview because he was overdue. But he gave a gloomy boy effort. 18th in the sprint, 13th in the Grand Prix. Really was a non-factor outside of his beef with Liam Lawson and AlphaTauri. But his struggles continue in Austin. He hadn't done well in Austin lately, and I said, "Oh, maybe he's gonna get back on track, and Austin will be the way." He's gonna have to figure that out for Mexico City because Austin was not the way. He probably does not like the brisket because it cost him in this race.
Yeah, just grumpy old man hours for Fernando Alonso this weekend. Kyle, who is your gloomy boy?
I have to go with Alex Albon because he got dog walked by Franco Colapinto. He did not have a good weekend. He was 16th in the featured race. I think in the sprint race, he was pretty much 17th. Like, he just was bad. And the fact that he is supposed to be viewed as the better of the two between him and Colapinto, it's not looking promising. And if I was Albon, I'd probably start being concerned. It's like, all right, they might replace me with Colapinto sooner rather than later with how the current trajectory is going. So yeah, Albon was just bad, was just terrible. And then to see his own teammate just do great, probably not encouraging for him.
No, that's a great one. And I like that you pointed that out too, because Carlos Sainz is going to be driving the Williams next year. If he can't handle Franco Colapinto, how the hell is he going to do measured up against Carlos Sainz? So, okay, well, he figures that out. Deepti, who is your gloomy boy?
Initially, I was going to go with Checo Perez because especially there was one part in the race, which was really funny. He was trying to get past, I don't remember who, but he was taking forever to get past whoever it was. Yes. And the commentators talked about that. They're like, okay, here's Checo trying to get past. Several laps later, they go back and they're like, and he's still there, still trying to get past. It's not working. However, unfortunately, I had alluded to this earlier. I will have to give it to Lewis Hamilton. Not a good weekend for him. Crashed out in Q1. Not crashed out, but didn't make it past Q1. Not entirely his fault, but still didn't get past in qualifying. And then, of course, didn't finish. Crashed out in 2 laps. And I think this is the shortest race since Qatar last year, I want to say, when he was gone on the first lap. Like I said, the first race that in the US that he hasn't completed. So not great weekend to forget for Lewis.
Extreme to forget. It was very unfortunate. I love that you brought up that Perez moment because it was extremely funny. They would cut away for like 5 minutes and come back and he's like, and he's still behind him. So it was, which again, Austin is not a difficult track to make a pass on. Like you can, especially if you're in DRS range. Now, obviously we had that whole conversation earlier, but all right. Mine, I'm sorry. We talked about it last episode, like in our preview. I was scared it was going to be Yuki. It's Yuki for me. Just like Kyle, just like with Alex Albon, like these drivers are not responding well to the rookies coming in and being hungry, being aggressive, positioning themselves, qualifying better, scoring more points, all of that. Yuki was outscored by Liam Lawson. He was real fussy on the radio as well. Like, how did that happen? They even had Lawson give Yuki a tow a couple times for a couple of his laps in qualifying. He was complaining about that. Tell him when he's done off the tow, he has to go this direction, not that direction. I'm like, yo, he's helping you out. Like, just drive the lap, put the time on the board, and it didn't work. He wasn't able to get himself really any higher than what he had been doing previously. It was just not a good weekend. You heard a lot of the frustration on the radio, and he just had a really bad time, especially with Liam getting points in that RB, the same car. It's kind of a bad look. So Yuki is my gloomy boy of the weekend. Okay, we're going to finish up with some social media stuff. So Kyle, if you don't mind, walk us through the social media things that we need to react to and discuss, because there are so many funny things that happened this weekend.
Yeah, I'll kind of go all over the place. We've already talked about with Fernando Alonso and Liam Lawson having their little spat, to the point in which Visa Cash App Instagram account had a picture of Lawson and Fernando Alonso, and it said just a Visa Cash App Red Bull driver and a Racing Point F1 driver having a chat.
Oh, shots fired.
And for those that aren't familiar, Aston Martin used to be Racing Point before Lawrence Stroll came through and kind of rebranded. It used to be Racing Point, aka Force India, all vibes, rules didn't apply. So the fact that after Fernando Alonso was calling Lawson an AlphaTauri driver, Visa Cash App clapped back at them. So that is one. The other is there is a video going around of Jensen Button. God bless his soul. He's trying, but having to just listen to Danica Patrick talk. There's a particular video in which it's kind of like in The Office where someone just like looks at the camera when something like Jim Halpert would just look at the camera after Dwight said something.
Fourth wall, yeah.
It was a fourth wall, and Jensen Button's like, I can't do this. He's doing just enough to let us know that this is ridiculous, but not showing it in a way that can get him in trouble. That was another one. The Formula One account went around asking drivers to try and name American sports teams just based off of their logos. Everyone was very unsuccessful, except for Pierre Gasly, who was able to get the Kansas City Chiefs. So way to save your job, Pierre, by not upsetting the best player on your investor team.
That's also very smart to do, protect the money. But also, like, what was it? Was it Hulkenberg who called the Broncos Super Horse?
Yes.
Superstar horse. Yes. And then Yuki, the what was it?
Brooklyn Greens.
Brooklyn Greens, yes.
Brooklyn
For the
Greens,
Boston Celtics logo was the Brooklyn Greens. Yeah, that video is hilarious. We think we have a global swear a lot of times in America. We kind of get a little centric, America-centric, and be like, yeah, everybody knows like our sports teams. American sports are like the biggest thing in the world. And then when you see stuff like this, you're like, maybe not. Super horse. Yep.
It's not a wrong description. I mean, Lando Norris said the Green Bay Packers were Gatorade, which I don't understand how you get that one so wrong.
Especially because it's sports team. It's not like a brand.
And it's like Gatorade is everywhere. So like he should know Gatorade. But besides the point.
The one that I loved was I think it was George Russell with the Nashville Predators. He defiantly was like, this is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he just held up and smiled. And he was like, I'm right, am I? And they're like, no, you're not right.
Sorry.
His heart was broken.
You don't have the right animal. You don't have the right city. You don't have the right
sport. Yeah.
I was gonna say wrong sport altogether. It was,
but he was like, I've known this since I was a baby. I've been a Jacksonville Jaguars fan since the birth.
And the Jaguars go to London like every year. They've been doing that for like 5, 6, 7 years.
They were in London this weekend.
They were just there.
It's amazing.
Just parked there.
Yeah, so that was great. And I do enjoy because George Russell before I was like, oh, there's no stupid questions. I was like, you're right, but there are stupid answers. The other Oscar Piastri was going through social media, and in typical Oscar Piastri form, there was one where it was just saying like, oh yeah, Oscar Piastri and Tame Impala, and he's like, I don't understand why. And then someone's like, you put a song of his. He's like, oh yes, because I made that TikTok and I chose Tame Impala. Yeah. And it's just the most Oscar Piastri form of it. And he's got other ones where it was talking about like him and Lando, and he's like, it's not as good as Carlando, guys. Like, it's fine.
His dry delivery is what sells it. It's just very funny. He's just like, oh yes, the TikTok I made with Tame Impala.
That one is like you have to click the link and watch it. Like it does it full justice.
We're gonna put all these in the show notes. So yeah, go watch it.
Then there was Franco Colapinto. We kind of talked about it. He was on track to get fastest lap. Alpine decided, nope, we're actually going to have Esteban Ocon do it, who was doing terrible. And Colapinto was just like, the fastest lap was taken by the French. Why did they change the tires, bro? We need to save the planet. Say that as Pierre Gasly also walks by. It's just like...
That's so Gen Z of him, caring about the planet.
It is so incredible that he said save the planet because he wanted.
I didn't realize he was the one on fastest lap, so that's why I was even more like, wait, what?
Just perfect. I like Franco. Franco's extremely hilarious, but in that moment, it also doesn't seem like he's laughing. He's kind of like, think of the polar bears. So look what they just did. Look what they did to the polar bears for the fastest lap. Like, can you believe this shit?
He's very upset. And then lastly, they went around the paddock and having everyone quote I feel like this is when you know you've followed F1 enough. Long time ago when they were younger, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen had a racing accident. They asked Max what it is, and it's like, oh, it's not fair. Like, this isn't right, blah, 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 blah. Basically, more or less what Max is like now. But they had everyone just continue quoting it. And it was like a wide variety. It had like Jack Duhan and Ollie Behrman doing it. Liam Lawson was doing it. George was there. And then at the end, what makes this more famous, young Charles Leclerc is like, oh, nothing, it's just an incident. And how he says it was just like, that's what makes the meme. But... So yeah, they went through the whole paddock. Everyone was quoting it, ending with Charles. So that is probably my favorite one of the week, because it's like, all right, this is how you know you're very deep in the F1.
I love all of those. And again, they will be in the show notes. So watch all of those because they are extremely hilarious, whether F1 puts it together or they would rather not have Jensen Button. A video of him looking very unfortunate because Danica Patrick is back, which again, I tweeted from the pod account, like jump scare every time we see her. Like, it's just like, oh my God, why can you stop? Sky
Danica
Sports
got a weird case. Why is she around?
Thank you. Enough said. Like, can we not? Can we not?
Nothing. Like, she may even take away some.
She absolutely does, because they were done with one segment and they were done and they were kind of waiting for her to say something, and she was looking around like completely clueless, just kind of looked to her right, looked to her left. Nobody was talking. And then she goes, yeah. And then that was it. I'm like, you need more words. You're on live television, whatever. Yeah, not a fan of her. You can find somebody better. I appreciate the attempt at diversity. Get Naomi Sheriff, Natalie Pinkin, like get somebody else that deserves to be up there. It's just, again, like Kyle said, got a weird case. Why is she around? Okay. I think we're done reviewing this race. We will be back with a preview probably really quickly. We're going to have to turn that around real quick because Mexico is coming up. In fact, it is a triple header. So we got 3 weekends of racing to come up. So Mexico is next, and then Brazil is after that. 2 tracks that I love. This is kind of like the fun, like racers portion of the season, when you got like Austin, which is a great track, Mexico, which is a great track, and then Interlagos and Brazil, which is another great track. I love those tracks. So we'll do a preview of those races as well, and of course review them. So for Kyle, for Deepti, for Donald, we are DRS FC, and we will be back to preview Mexico. Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.